Okay, this is now tarot lesson number 53, and it may be quite long. I'm telling you that now so that I can maybe not rush through thinking that I've got to get this all done quickly. So it's going to be in two parts. The first part's going to be about the tarot, and the second part's going to be about astrology. And I'd like to make the point at the beginning that the tarot and astrology are really very different. So there is a motto in English, look before you leap. And that's good advice sometimes, right? So rather than rush into things, and check it out first and make sure that you know what you're doing. This can be the Fool card. But there's also another motto, he who hesitates is lost, meaning by all means check things out, but you can go beyond the point where you ought to take action. So look before you leap is good advice. He who hesitates is lost is also good advice. So with the tarot, you can pick a major trump. I ask people to pick two numbers, and that gives me two major trumps that are important for the person at that time and for the next period, right? So if you pick the Hermit, now is the time. You're telling yourself now is the time to be alone and think things through and figure out what you're going to do and what direction you're going to go in and so on. But tomorrow, if you've figured it all out, maybe the advice for tomorrow is the Magician, make a new start, or you've got creative ideas, do something with them, begin to do something with them. And this I think is what the tarot is good for. It tells you and answers questions like, this is what to do now and tomorrow and maybe the day after. And this is the next step that you ought to take. Or if you take this next step, then you're going in a good direction. You're going to end up where you want to be. But astrology is how you're built. And so there's an awful lot in astrology. And I'm going to get to that in a bit. But I'd like to look first at these 5 questions that I wrote down a while ago. I've got some scribbles on here, so that I folded the paper over. So I'm suggesting that you get 5 or a number of typical questions, and you use maybe the same card to answer each of the questions, because it's going to get you thinking about the card or the meaning of the card in different contexts, and it's going to get your thinking different, or it's going to get your thinking to be more adaptable depending on the question that was asked. So if the question is what have we got? How does my friend feel about me? And I've picked one card. I get the 3 of Cups. How does your friend feel about you? They like you, they're happy with you, you're on the same page, you dance together, you cooperate with each other, you celebrate. And it's a good card in that way. And so maybe we take the idea of celebration, whereas if it's upside down, mostly they like you, but when you get drunk, they don't like what you do. I'm saying drunk because it's cups upside down, and there is an old expression in Latin, I think, in vino veritas, when you drink too much, when there's wine involved, the truth comes out. Okay, but maybe the person doesn't like the truth that you speak when your tongue has been loosened. Okay, so that's one way of looking at the 3 of Cups. How does my friend feel about me? The second question is, how is the interview going to go? And if we get the 3 of Cups, that's okay. So the interview is going to go well, and you'll like them, they'll like you. But think about you know there's a difference between how does my friend feel about me and how will the interview go, because you've known your friend for years, let's say. And so celebration with a friend can mean going out and going to a restaurant and having a 3-hour dinner. Whereas celebration in an interview, you've only known the people for half an hour maybe or less. And so it's a good card. So it's saying, yes, you're going to get it's a bit like the celebration involves standing up after the interview, shaking hands and saying, congratulations, you've got the job. But they're not going to say, let's go out and get drunk, get wasted. That your friend might say that to you, but the interviewer is not going to say it. So you've got the same idea of celebration, but you understand what to say about the kind of celebration, if it's how does a friend feel about you, as opposed to how will the interview go. So you, the reader, are looking at the same card, but you're adapting what you say to fit or to make sense for the question that was asked, even though it's the same kind of card or the same kind of meaning, celebration, but you can't talk about celebration in the same way. And question 3 was, why did the relationship fail? And here we've got the Three of Cups again. Why did it fail? Because the thing is, I like to say, the Three of Cups is the answer to why did the relationship fail, not how could the relationship have been better. So you have to look at this card of celebration and figure out in what way is celebration the reason for the failure. So maybe you would say you were good together when things were going well, but when you had a problem, you didn't know what to do, or you couldn't handle it properly, or it was just too difficult to face. When things were going well, it was okay, but when things were not going well, or there was a problem with somebody else, that's why the relationship failed, because you had no backup plan, or you weren't able to handle the bad times. So why did it fail? Because the good times were all that you could handle. And so you might talk about, this is the thing, going back to the first point about astrology and the tarot, you can, with the Three of Cups, why did the relationship fail? You can talk about your own personal experience in a relationship, and that will be relevant for the questioner. But you can't do the same with astrology, and I'll get to that. So question 4, what does that say? Oh, how do I improve? With the Three of Cups, how do you improve? Celebrate. Find something to be happy about, or find other people. Take a class, or socialize more, or instead of being so much or as much of a hermit, go out and meet people and take classes and socialize with people and spend time with them away from work or outside of work. It's a card of celebration and dancing. So maybe you take a dance class, but you've got a way of looking at the world. How do you improve? So be a social animal. And I think the point is, if it's upside down, be social rather than be an animal, right? That kind of thing. So that's how you improve, rather than you find other people who are on the same page as you, or other people who have the similar kind of interest or desire or hobbies, and you interact with them. It doesn't mean you're going to end up with them forever, but if you remember, this is the next step, or the first step to take, that will get you on a path that you enjoy being on. And that's how you improve. First, find other people. And then the fifth question was, what's the purpose of life today? The purpose of life is to enjoy. There's a line in Bob Dylan, can't remember the song, the time that is yours and mine to be upon this earth, we'll play it out the best we can, whatever it may be worth. So what we've got here with it, what's the purpose of life today, is put energy and your enthusiasm into whatever it is that you're doing. And if it turns out to be meaningless, okay, it turns out to be meaningless, but at least you enjoyed the journey, so to speak. And that can be the answer for today, right? Three of Cups. Celebrate, enjoy yourself, find something to be happy about, because that's what life is for. You're born not to be miserable. You're born to be happy. So what makes you happy? And know it and pursue it, rather than think that you're a miserable sinner and that your life is meant to be tough, because it isn't. And then tomorrow, what's the purpose of life? I had picked the sun card for earlier. This is because go back to question 1, how will the interview go? And you get the sun card. It's a bit like, it's a card of celebration as well and enjoyment, but it's a bit like you in the interview recognize that the company or the job is what you've always wanted, and it's going to be fulfilling and satisfying for you. And the people interviewing you recognize that you will be a valuable addition to the company or to the workforce, whatever it happens to be. Because it's a major trump. And it's celebration, but it's a different kind of celebration from the Three of Cups. This is more social. This is more life-changing or company-changing. Okay, that was part 1 about the tarot. And part 2, I've got my notes here. Okay, so part 2. When it comes to astrology, people generally think, that's astrology. Oh no, that's me. And this is astrology. So that I'm sort of, not that I'm bigger than astrology, but that astrology is a tool, and I can learn to use the tool to help me live better. But I think the opposite is true. It's more like, this is astrology, and that's you. You're a tiny dot within the wholeness or within all astrology. So I'll tell you a little bit here about, I've got the moon. So the moon in a horoscope represents the mental personality. It's how you think. And I've got an example here. There's Pisces, 30 degrees, 0 to 30. That's Pisces. And every sign is 30 degrees. But it's divided, each sign can be divided into 3 10-degree portions called decanates. So people born at, I'm talking about sun sign, but people born at the beginning of Pisces are not the same as people born at the end of Pisces. Because people born at the beginning of Pisces, it's the Pisces decanate. In the middle, it's the Cancer decanate. And at the end, it's the Scorpio decanate. So people are not the same. All Pisceans are not the same. All Leos are not the same. Depends which part of the sign you were born in. So the last so at the beginning of Pisces, you're interested in truth, right? So you're a truth seeker, and so that's your motivation, so to speak. Whereas at the end, it's very different. It's a Scorpio decanate, and it's huge ups and huge downs. So the moon is the mental personality. And so my wife happens to have the moon at 24 degrees of Pisces. And I want to tell you 3 things from recently. We took the train to Toronto a while ago, like a month ago maybe. And it was a sunny day. We were sitting in the platform on a bench in the platform, and a pregnant woman walked past. And my wife noticed that the woman had a long dress on and flip-flops, and the dress was almost touching the ground. And my wife said to me, if that woman trips, she could easily trip on the dress. It's too long. And I thought, okay. But I looked at the woman and saw nothing and thought nothing of it. Later, we're in Toronto, and we're going up Bay Street, and we crossed King Street, and we were going to turn right to go across Bay Street to the next block. And so we're at the corner. Let's see, that's the corner. And there's a car coming around this way, if you can see that. So we were here on the sidewalk, and somebody was rushing behind us. There's the south side of King. And somebody was rushing behind us here and got onto the sidewalk like half a second before the car sped round the corner. And my wife observed that if the person behind us had been half a second later, he'd have been hit by the car. And I thought, okay, well, it wouldn't happen, because my wife doesn't drive, but if you drive, you know that you're not expecting that the pedestrian is going to suddenly come to a stop 3 feet from the sidewalk. So it's not going to happen. But anyway, later we're on the streetcar, and there's a building on the right-hand side, and my wife says to me, she wouldn't want to live in that building because it's probably dark inside, and this is because the building has black cladding and it looks dark on the outside, even though it can be totally different on the inside. And the reason I'm giving you these three examples is because my wife has, with the moon at 24 degrees of Pisces, she's kind of predisposed to always figure out what's wrong. So you say anything, she'll immediately figure out what can go wrong or what's wrong with it. Not that she then takes the next step, what's wrong with it, let me do something about it. She sort of thinks, okay, what's wrong with it? And then she gets stuck. And it's the people with the moon in the last portion of Pisces, that's how they think. So if you say to somebody who with the moon in this part of the zodiac, this is what might go wrong, they're going to take what might go wrong and they're going to amplify it and give it more strength and turn it into something that it probably isn't. And it's just the way they're built. So there's something, but there's more to it than that, because my wife happens to be a Leo, right? So she's like, and remember that the moon is no light of her own. The moon shines by reflected light. So the moon reflects the sun. You start with the sun and then the moon reflects something back. So my wife is a Leo, so she's always on stage and everything is drama. So you put the dramatic nature of Leo together with the depressed state of mind of late Pisces, and you've got somebody who is kind of always stuck and not exactly always miserable, because she's got a happy side to her as well. But it's a bit like when she was 5 years of age, when something, no matter, she's in with her little friends at school maybe, if something goes wrong, she looks at the thing that goes wrong, and even though she's only 5, she's going to magnify it and turn it into something major and turn it into a major problem. So this is the problem when it comes to astrology. You can't easily talk about a person because there's so much going on. You can say, yes, she's got the moon in Pisces, but then you have to factor in the sun and what its condition is, and the fact that the moon is at the end of Pisces, and because the last portion of Pisces is ruled by is Scorpio, it's ruled by Mars, so you also have to factor in Mars, which happens to be in Libra. And so you can't just, with the tarot, you can take, okay, how is the relationship good, or how is the interview going to go? The Three of Cups, you're going to get the job and everybody's going to be happy. How is the job going to? How is the interview going to go with a horoscope? It's much more complicated and complex, and you can't easily give a quick answer. You need to understand the nature of the individual with their Scorpio decanate moon in Pisces, and also Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So where's Jupiter? And what influence does Jupiter have on the mind of the individual? Plus the fact that that she's a Leo. If she'd been a Virgo, it'd have been different. A Virgo sun with a Piscean moon is not the same as a Leo sun with a Piscean moon. So it becomes like wheels within wheels and really complicated. And that's why it's so difficult to teach astrology, and why it's you can't, there's no shortcut to an understanding of astrology. It takes years and years, and you've got to observe and test, and you can't take a single point and run with it, which is what people do. Going back to this diagram here, because this is, if that's you, this is not astrology. It's you're not bigger than it. This is astrology, and you're a tiny speck inside all of astrology. So recently, I watched a video about the progressed moon, and so you've got the new moon the first quarter, the full moon, and the third quarter. And so you can divide each quadrant into 2 parts as well. So you get 8 phases of the moon, right? And so the person who was being interviewed talked about how this last part of the cycle, the last 45 degrees, is the balsamic phase of the moon. And so when you personally are in that kind of part of the cycle, then it's a time of the balsamic moon. It's a time of self-exploration and diving deep and analysing and looking to figure out what worked in the past and what didn't work in the past. So she's talking like this, and I thought, wait a minute, that's all very well, but she happened to have the moon, the mental personality, in Scorpio. The woman talking this way about the nature of the balsamic moon, she was predisposed to want to look within anyway, because she's got the moon at 22 Scorpio, which is the spiritual decanate of Scorpio. No, so she's predisposed or programmed to look within and to try to uncover hidden depths, and she looks deep within her own self. So she can't. The problem with astrology is, and what most people do, is they take their own experience, their own personal makeup, and they generalize from it. And you can't do that, because you can if you want, if you're talking to somebody who's also got the moon at 22 degrees to Scorpio. But you can't if you're talking to somebody who's got the moon in the last 10 degrees of Pisces. So it just doesn't work. Oh yeah, so one last point I'd like to make is, and I understand, I'm not getting at anybody, I'm just trying to, I'm giving you one view of what's involved with the astrological factors and astrological charts and how you read a horoscope and what's involved in reading a horoscope. And I wrote down marriage because when in the interview or the talk I did with Laurie a while ago, if you can do a chart for the time of marriage, right? So when you say I do, or when the marriage is formally, legally binding and it has begun, you do a chart for that moment, and that describes the marriage itself. And Mercury will describe the children. Will there be children? What would they be like? And how will they get along with other people? So if you're dealing with your natal chart. If you're somebody's wife, you're dealing with the moon in the marriage chart. And so the moon can be in well placed and strong, which means that you, the wife, have got a big say in the relationship. But if you've got if you're married when the moon's in the 6th house, you're the servant, and you're meant to clean up after everybody and be a good cook and cleaner. Which that's not necessarily a bad thing if your natal chart will let you be a servant, or if you're born with a servant mentality, you don't mind being the servant in the marriage. But if you've got ambition and you want to do things and be your own person, then getting married with the moon in the 6th house, you're going to hate it. Whereas if you think of yourself as somebody's husband, it's the sun in the marriage chart. And so if the sun is well placed, then you run the marriage. If the sun is down here, or down here actually, then the wife controls the husband. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a difficulty if the husband wants to be in charge, because with the sun down here, I mean, it's midnight. You don't get married at midnight usually. It's going to be difficult for the husband. Whereas, and so my point is, I'd like to make one last point, that if somebody goes to an astrologer and says, okay, I'm having trouble in my marriage, I guarantee the astrologer doesn't say, give me your time, date and place of marriage. So they can look at the marriage chart and understand what's going on with the marriage. They'll take your natal chart and look at the 7th house maybe for husbands and wives, or they'll look at the transits where the planets are today and how they relate to where they were when you were born, and they'll do something with transits. But they're not going to ask you for the marriage chart. And this is because they think this is them and this is astrology, whereas this is astrology. There's marriage charts, natal charts, solar returns, decanates, duads, degrees, progression. There's everything. It's huge. And that's why astrology is so difficult. And why astrology on the internet in particular is so weak, I think. So, people recently have asked about doing natal charts. I don't see how you can. So I can't. I don't. My horoscope doesn't allow it. It'd be nice to be able to do it, but I can't. However, I do. I did put together an astrology course a while ago, and you get like 28 hours of video and 20 hours one-on-one with me, and 15 or 14 PDFs. But it's cost $1,000. I mean, it's worth it, but it's a long-term study, and but anyway, that's kind of. I just wanted to talk about astrology a bit. And to make the point that with the tarot, you personally can just to right now, no matter how much you know or how little you know, you can pick a card and you can give good information to anybody about the answer to their question, just because you're you and you've been through a certain amount of life. But if you're you and you've been studying astrology for a couple of years, you're not in a position to claim that you can tell somebody about themselves. You can give them maybe general information, but that's not that much of a help, I don't think. And it's not as much of a help as a tarot reading, because the tarot is right now. Go back to look before you leap. So you can if the choice is, do I jump and take a chance, or do I hold back and think it through a bit more? With the devil reversed, think it through a bit more. Or where's another card? Some other card. With the 10 of coins, 10 is 1 plus nothing, gets you back to 1 again. It's time for a new beginning. You've thought things through enough. Start moving. So you can give correct and accurate answers with a card or with a combination of cards much more readily than you can with looking at a horoscope, just because there's so much to consider in a horoscope. Okay, that was my rant, I suppose. Today is, I don't know, Friday, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'll be back again on Wednesday. Have a good day. Bye-bye.